Here.
David Roshka.
Here.
Rossi Menka.
Here.
Eric Torkelson.
Here.
Kathleen Dagenhart, Brian Frank, and Brandon Reinke are excused.
All right,
We have a quorum.
great. And our next item will be approval of the minutes from our meeting in September.
So moved.
Got a motion
Our second.
or a second. Got a motion by Commissioner Clark, second by Commissioner Katzenmeier. All in favor of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Ayes have it. Minutes are approved. We will move on to item D, and we will take up items 2A and 2B.
Thank you, Mayor. Items 2A and 2B are the three-leaf apartments, for conditional use and site landscaping and architectural plan review. This project is located at 853056 West National Ave. This is the site of the Clark Oil Building, a commercial office building. It's a proposed development for 247 apartments, an estimated project cost of $48 million. The plan would be to have construction in early 2023, and the construction window would be about 16 to 18 months. So they'd be opening in late 2024, early 2025. Zoning is C2, and the proposed use, a dwelling with 5 or more units, is a conditional use in the C2 district. So before we get into the plans tonight, I just wanted to share some context. First, from a planning perspective, this area has been studied in the 2016 National Avenue Corridor Strategic Plan, which called for more housing, public improvements, and other coordinated investments in the corridor. This specific project area is part of the Honey Creek redevelopment area or targeted investment area from this plan, which called for higher intensity residential development. You'll notice that the building or the property we're looking at was not included in this at the time. The city did not know that this property had the potential for redevelopment, but this part of that corridor was calling specifically for that higher intensity residential development. And we've seen with a lot of development on the National Avenue corridor, but most of it concentrated on the east side of the corridor. This could be the first transformative project on the west side of 84th Street. Some context for the location. The property that we're talking about today is located right here. It's very close to another taller residential building, the 6-story Sunrise Apartments. It's also across the street from the Honey Creek Park, the West House Water Tower, Historic Society. There's this kind of interesting triangular-shaped parcel, which is we see as a key site for future redevelopment immediately to its east. And we have obviously the skate park over here on the east side of 84th Street. Some more context. The Planning Commission and Common Council reviewed a rezoning request associated with the 2021 proposal. The conditional use and the site landscaping and architectural plans for that project never made it to Planning Commission or Common Council, but the lot was rezoned from split I1 or M1 at the time, now I1, C2 to just solely C2 in accordance with our comp plan. And there was a conceptual plan for a 200-unit development that was going to be mixed income apartments. The developers applied for low-income housing tax credits in early 2022, but were not awarded those tax credits, much like many other projects in the Milwaukee area. And then following that, there was some shifting around with the developers. Bethesda Lutheran kind of pulled out of all new developments and focused more on maintaining, and managing their properties. Meanwhile, Catalyst Partners, their project partner, merged with a different development group to become Three Leaf Partners. And now that group is reviving the project in this form. So getting into the plans, first the site plan. The building would be over 140,000 square feet. It's in conformance with the zoning code standards for the C2 district. The main entrance you'll see is at the center of the building. There'd be kind of an entrance plaza surrounding that. Sorry, the mouse is being a little laggy today, so I might not be able to point things out exactly. There'd be 3 vehicle access points into the property, noted in orange. On the east side of the property, there'd be an entrance to the lower garage, and then there'd be 2 entrances to a small surface lot and the ground floor garage further to the west of the property. But essentially that building will take up the bulk of this kind of oddly shaped parcel, and it's oriented towards West National Avenue and kind of running the length of that lot. There's a preliminary landscaping plan that was submitted. We won't go too in depth with this as it's just preliminary at this point. This would be a required condition of any approval to submit, plans that be approved by the City Forestry Department. But the preliminary plans show pretty extensive tree plantings and landscaped planting beds along the frontage of the building and up to the sides as well. So the architectural plan, the city and the developer have. The developer submitted an initial proposal to the city, and we've worked with them, and I think we made some strong improvements to the design. This is a view looking east at the kind of starting from the west end of the building. The architecture for the building, 6 stories, it's be 68 feet tall on average. The site is sloped pretty significantly in some parts, so towards that east end of the property would appear more like 80 feet from grade. This city planning staff believes it's an appropriate height for the site. This is a really key redevelopment site along a major corridor, similar to other buildings in the area with the Sunrise Apartments, which are approximately 62 feet tall and actually appear taller because they're kind of built up on this kind of hill that's higher than the street level. It's also across the street from this large open space, and it's also buffered from the northern lower density residential by the railroad corridor. Taking a look at the elevations, there's a variety of different materials which the developers have provided some samples of today if you want to pass those around, Mayor or Steve. The primary facade material facing the street frontage would be a kind of cream-colored brick. A lot of ways we think that pays good homage to kind of the history of the area, history of Milwaukee, with the kind of, obviously the cream-colored brick being very prominent. The Historic Society across the street, has a similar kind of color pattern as well. There will also be hardy, other durable materials used in a lot of the facade. Hardy plank, fiber cement board would be used in a couple different colors as kind of an accent, and as more prominently on that the northern facade of the building as well. And then there would be some, aluminum type, for the storefront windows and for the residential windows, aluminum type framing. The balconies would be also aluminum. Certain ones would have kind of a glass. The ones closest, I guess, to my mouse will work here. It won't. Closest to the street, there would be kind of a glass plate as the kind of barrier of those balconies. In other parts, it would just be kind of aluminum posts. But the building overall has a kind of strong kind of color composition. You'll notice that there's some kind of caps, cornice features on some prominent corners of the building as well that were added in after some city discussion back and forth with the developer. Let's see if this will move to the next slide here. Here we go. We wanted to include, and we worked with the developer to kind of improve this as well. We wanted to focus on the ground floor and activating the ground floor. The developer put many of the amenities. This is an entirely residential building, but many of those amenities for the residents that are more active will be located on the ground floor adjacent to the street with large prominent windows. So there's kind of a good blending of some of the public and private realm there, and you're kind of creating more interest at the ground level and near the entrance. The lobby was also, is right now it's oriented towards the street. That was something we kind of worked with the developer to tweak as well. There's a nice awning. There'd be some planters, and staff recommends adding some sort of seating area or something like that as well to kind of create a kind of bigger sense of place right at that entrance there. We did receive some concerns from an alderperson, Alderwoman Grisham, some concerns that the facade looks too similar to other types of development, wanting to more interesting, maybe roof lime or different colors and form, and kind of a unique. I guess she expressed it as a pretty prominent redevelopment desire for our unique design with that historic aesthetic. Moving into the floor plans, and you can see this kind of S shape. This is something maybe from those architectural renderings you couldn't quite tell, but the building will really rise after that second story in this kind of S-shaped form, where it'll make 2 amenity decks. One will be south facing and one north facing. There's going to be a really big mix of unit types in this building, ranging from studios to 3 bedrooms units. Vehicle parking. There will be a proposed. There is proposed 319 vehicle parking spaces on site. This meets the zoning code, which allows a maximum of 494. There'd be 295 structured indoor spaces. Those would be separated onto 189 on that ground floor garage, which is accessed by the western driveways, and then there'd be 106 in the lower garage, accessed by the eastern driveway. There's also 24 outdoor spaces provided, which can be used for guests and deliveries, things like that. This is a parking ratio of 1.3 per unit. This is in line with other modern developments like Sona, which was at 1.4 spaces per unit. Staff believes this is an adequate level of parking for the facility, especially with the big oversupply of street parking that's really underutilized in the area as well. Bicycle parking is also included. 63 indoor spaces are provided in this room adjacent to the garage on the ground floor, so it's easily accessible by the residents. This meets the requirements of the code, which require 49. There's also going to be 8 outdoor spaces located just to the west of the entry lobby, and that meets our code as well. Highlighting some of the amenities on the ground floor, there will be a few different amenities. Obviously, the lobby, there's going to be an office and business center for people working from home. That's something that there's been a lot more demand for since COVID. It's something a lot of new developments are including. There's also a fitness center. And those are both facing the street with really generous windows and helping to activate that space. On the second floor, there's a club room that can be rented out by guests for parties or by residents for parties and things like that. There's also 2 amenity decks, and this is kind of one of the key selling points of this developer or of this development to potential residents. There's the western front yard, kind of front yard style, amenity deck. It's facing the south, so it'll have a lot of sun exposure. There's going to be pools and cabanas. The back side will be on the east. It's more like grill stations, fire pit, outdoor games, dog runs, so things kind of more of that backdoor or backyard kind of feel. Ultimately, staff recommends approval subject to several conditions. First would be some plan revisions to provide that landscaping and plant species plan and have it be approved by the City Forestry Department. We also wanted to incorporate some more decorative elements like art or trellises to the south exterior wall next to the surface parking lot. I'll just back up to kind of highlight this. So this right below the pool, let's see if the mouse works again, no. Right below the pool there's that kind of wall. It's all brick, and it's pretty pretty standard. It's just simple design on there. We think adding something to kind of spruce that up could be a positive for that kind of part of the facade that could use a little more attention, I guess. Let's see if we can jump forward here. Is this on? There we go. We'd also like to add seating for the entrance plaza, and then just provide details on the bike racks that will be provided indoors and outdoors. Some other requirements: a surety bond, documentation showing compliance with the city's stormwater management ordinance, and then just coordinating work with city engineer, and then of course Common Council approval of the conditional use permit, which has not been scheduled but would be planned for the December 13th Common Council meeting. And we can open up to questions and comments. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Zach, a couple of questions. When is construction expected to begin and be completed?
I believe early 2023, and if the team from Three Leaf Partners would like to say anything as well to address that question or anything like that as well.
Sure. Or just stand.
Yeah, sure. If you want to come up here, actually. If you come up right there, actually, with that microphone's working. So.
Yeah. Good evening. I'm David Lyon. I'm with Three Leaf Partners, and I'm joined here tonight by my colleague behind me, John Peckin. We also have a development partner, Ryan Douglas, who's the CEO and founder of LandQuest, and also our architect, Jason Korb of Korb Associate Architects, is here tonight to make sure I answer all the questions properly. So the first question was in regards to timing. I think as mentioned earlier, we're seeking to break ground, start construction in the first quarter, towards the end of the first quarter of 2023, so early 2023.
And if things go well, when do you expect to be able to be leasing?
Well, I think this is an 18 to 24 month build, so we would start pre-leasing probably in that 3 to 4 months prior to completion of construction. And then, John, are we projecting a 9 to 12 month absorption period?
We're projecting a 14
14-month absorption after that to be completely leased up.
And looking at your 1 bedrooms and your 3 bedrooms, what's the at the current time? What's the thinking about rent? How much? Is it too soon to know?
Well, we have some projections.
I
You want to give a range?
Yeah, so the average rental rate across all units will be approximately $1,600. That comes out to right under $2 a square foot.
We do have some units, studios and junior 1 beds, right, John? And John did an analysis for us that you want to sort of talk about on the affordability end. They're all market rate, but we do have some units that would be affordable, more affordable than.
Yeah, so we have multiple floor plans for each unit type. So we have 3 unit types where the rents will actually fall below 80% AMI rental levels, which are specifically set aside for individuals or families that earn at or below $52,000 per year. So although we're not marketing these as affordable units, they do meet the 80% set aside that WIDA publishes on an annual basis.
And that AMI stands for area median income, if you didn't know. So they're less than 100% of the the area median income.
Thank you.
I think that's great. Thank you for setting some of those houses aside. I know that's a big need in the city, housing. So thank you. I want to commend you for that. And then what about the roof? Is there any way we can get some kind of green roof up there? Definitely hold
Yeah, I'll
more water
let
when it
Jason speak
rains.
to that because we do have those kind of treatments on our amenity decks versus the roof, which tends to house. We call it a condenser farm. It tends to house, the air conditioning units. You want to speak
Sure.
briefly about what we typically do?
So the short answer is yes. The longer answer is we don't know how extensive it will be yet.
Sure.
We're not generally comfortable putting green roofs or anything that retains stormwater above 5 floors of apartments.
Okay.
However, the 2 roofs that Zach described to you, they're over a concrete parking structure, so we're much more comfortable introducing more decorative elements in the roof. And frankly, the site is big enough that we're going to have a state approved stormwater management plan, and that could very much be part of it.
Okay.
It's working
Great.
out, Steve.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sure, thank you. First off, thank you for addressing the needs of the housing for the 52,000 because housing is definitely a big need in the community, and I know that there's been housing struggles as well too. What is your reaction? I know Alderwoman Gristrom has brought up some concerns, and I'm kind of curious on your reaction to those because I could see where she's coming from, that they do kind of look similar to like the Mendel project down the road.
And even more specifically, the historic disconnect maybe from the historic nature of that part of National Avenue. For me, it starts at the placeholder. I want to assure everyone that 3 Leaf Apartments is just a placeholder staff elected because we haven't named it yet. So we've already embarked on a theming exercise. It's not reflected in this first iteration of design, but that theming exercise will include investigating the historic nature of this location, what's important to the city, and then pulling through those elements into what we can within the next iteration. Maybe Jason wants to speak to this further, but it really is about theming, whether that's a combination of signage, the potential murals that sit on that blank wall, if you will. It really is a canvas that Zach was speaking of below the pool in terms of maybe the art can pull through some historic significance to that part of the community. So that's where we usually start. We've done this in other locations, in other communities, and so it's the theming. And so, again, we're going to be really proactive and sensitive to that going forward.
Okay. Thank you. We appreciate that because I know the historical significance of this area as well, too, to the city. So.
Yep, absolutely. We really want this to have a sense of place, and I think by connecting to that history, people will get that and will be attracted to that.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Oh, I'm sorry.
The Motion
The
to approve in
gentleman
a
over there
second.
wants to
Are
ask
you,
a question.
sorry, who are you? Are you a resident or?
No, I'm Warren Coleman.
Okay.
I'm a representative for Carpenters.
Okay.
I have a question. Is there any plans for responsible bid ordinance?
Well, that would be something that the city would have to take up.
Well, is there any plans for Catalyst to do responsible bids on this project?
You know, you want me to respond to that?
Sure, go
Yeah, I really don't have an answer for you because we're a separate company from Catalyst Construction, if that's what you're referring to. So I would direct you to them. Again, we're a separate wholly owned development company from that construction company. I'm sorry it couldn't be any clearer than that. I apologize.
And if I could follow up, I've had a few people reach out to me
Yes, sir.
asking about the city adopt. They're looking into something like that, and I've told the individuals to start to try to find a council member to work on it. And then it just never, from what I know, they never took that next step. Some of these guys were in the painters and other laborers.
Can I get your name, sir?
Mayor Dan DeMont. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thanks.
Mayor,
Dan.
how many NMI units did you say? We're under the cold air return here, so it's hard to hear. I told them to shut that down a million times. Okay.
Sorry.
How many of those NMI?
AMI?
I'm sorry.
So,
Yeah, couldn't even hear it.
We will not have an affordable set aside, but the rent levels are set. So, an individual per WIDA's their rent limits and income limits, they would meet the 80% AMI threshold. So there won't be a specific affordable set aside, but the rent levels for those units are.
He's asking how many of them meet
Oh.
that criteria.
How many of them? I apologize. 78.
78?
Yes, 78, 9 studios, and then the balance are 1-bedroom units.
And then Zach, if you could go back to the slideshow, like the fourth slide is right there. That lower right, what elevation is that?
So that's looking from the east. That's from the east. So that would be what you would see when if you're turning right.
I'm turning right
off of 84th and you're coming up now.
You enter the parking,
Right.
the lower parking level there.
And then one more thing, there was someone on Facebook, a traffic engineer, bragging about, I worked on this project. We all know who it was today. What happened with that? What was the results of the traffic study or the traffic whatever? Did our engineering department, because that is a crowded intersection and a load 294 units at pretty much they all leave for work at the same time.
You work on 84th and National. Not this
No,
project.
he
You work
no,
on this
no,
project?
he had
Bragging
no,
about this one too.
Oh, okay.
Michael.
Find what you're talking
Yeah, okay. And then, how did that turn out? Did our engineering department look at that too? And because that's a lot of people there.
Yes, the
I'm done with this now.
the engineering department.
Oh, Marty wants it.
They did conduct a traffic study, and it was the engineering department was shared with them, and they approved it. If the staff, if the development team wants to speak to that at all, there's a pretty significant gap between this property and the intersection as well, because there is another property in between it and the intersection, and so staff doesn't foresee that there would be any problems with traffic in this intersection.
The word that they used in the traffic study. Thank you. I believe the words that they used in the traffic study, was, if I'm remembering correctly, is that the impact on National is negligible, just because the vehicle count is so high already. That adding this property to it does not significantly move the needle in one way or the other. So.
And to Zach's point, the distance from the intersection itself, yeah.
Mayor Devine, a couple of forward-looking questions. Are you thinking about putting electric vehicle chargers in the garage? Okay. And part two of that, I'm looking around the room. I know at least 4 people here own electric bikes. I'm hoping that you think about I like the idea of the indoor bike parking, but if you consider when you're doing the wiring that some of those bikes might need chargers too someday. So there's a real surge going on lately.
Excuse the pun.
There's a real conversation in the industry about that. There's a real conversation in the design industry about how many electric charging stations are appropriate. We've had clients that say we want every stall to be electric. Practically speaking, the most we've done in one development right now is 10. So,
On the electric bike, though.
no, that's an interesting idea. That's a new one for me. I like it.
But one we'll look into.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Just go ahead.
Go ahead.
This is more, now that we're looking at this view again, I know we talked about the wall of the parking structure, adding some, I'm looking at the east elevation there to the right of the, is that gonna have a lot of exposure when you're coming around the corner of National Avenue? Like, are we also looking at trying to do something there as well?
I think
I was just gonna say on the east elevation, the side closest to National Avenue, I guess would have the most exposure, but on the landscaping plan too, I don't know if Zach or if it's working, if we can go back to that, but they are proposing some landscaping at that corner. It's a little hard to see here, but there are some trees on that eastern elevation to sort of break up that lower portion of the elevation where there's brick. Sure. Obviously, you have the garage door where you're coming in off National, and then I think there are some balconies as you go further up, higher in the building, and there's some transitions between brick and some of the siding materials. So, and that was where we landed on this portion.
No, I'm seeing it here. I see there's a lot of screening in front of it. The elevation makes it look like you got this big two-story wall.
Yeah, and I think another thing is you just have to be comfortable with having stuff for that side as well. With the angle of the street and the building will appear further back, and with the potential for future development at the adjacent sites, you feel pretty comfortable with that.
I have another question. I might have missed it during the presentation, but how many ADA parking stalls do you plan on having for this, for both outdoors and indoors?
I don't think I didn't include it in your presentation, but I believe there's 6 in the lower garage.
Yep.
And 8 in the upper garage, and 2 in the service lot.
The number of those stalls is dictated by federal law, so we have to comply with it. It's not a negotiation point. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Devine, one more quick question. Go ahead, Alderman. Have we talked to the property to the east is underutilized currently, and I mean, I'm not saying that this has to be wrapped into it, but is there? I mean, because that thing's just been kind of sitting empty or with an ATM or something only in it at times. Yep. Is there anything going on there that this might help catalyze, or
everything's for sale? But I mean, that is an actual occupied property. It's a small office, I think, clinic of some sort, counseling and so on. So it is actually occupied. Newer owners, but you know, if they were to cease operations or want to sell their property, and it could be a potential.
I didn't mean to cast aspersions on them. Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? We do have a motion and a second before us, so if there's no other discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
great evening.
Thanks. Is anybody here from Duncan?
Yes, we do have a representative from Duncan.
Yeah, I'm with MRB Architects.
Gotcha. All right. I was going to go out of order just in case people were not here from there. But we're sticking with it now, so let's move on to item number 3.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Item 3 is a remodel for the Dunkin' Donuts located on Highway 100 at 2865 South 108th Street. The Dunkin' Donuts owner would like to remodel the existing building to fit some updated franchise branding. The zoning is C4 for the property. It's the use is a restaurant with a drive-through service. It's a conditional use. It's been approved. That's already been approved. And you'll note that and Applebee's is adjacent to the Dunkin' Donuts as well. Keep forgetting that's not working. So the site plan, there's really no significant proposed changes to the site plan. They're simply updating the clearance bar and the menu boards in compliance, I guess, with the branding for the company. So no significant site changes. Architecture will have some facade alterations. The most significant ones of which will be on the tower elements. There's 2 of those that will be updated. They'll be demolished and rebuilt with that new design, with the new company branding. There'll be new fiber cement exterior finishes, new signage, and then they'll also replace the awnings. And there'll be some new exterior light fixtures as well. Staff recommends approval.
Second.
We have a motion by Wayne, a second by Eric. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries.
We can look at it later, I'm not sure.
Quick and painless. Thanks. Move on to item 4.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Item 4 is signage plan for Makers Row and Sona Lofts. An overview, Makers Row is proposing 3 freestanding signs on 3 different parcels. So that complies with the number of freestanding signs per parcel. However, the unique design requires a sign plan appeal. And then the Sona Lofts are proposing 2 wall signs. That building qualifies for the master sign program. Makers Row freestanding signs are going to be a steel freestanding sign with a modern design. Mix those words up a little bit. The signage is tailored to that development's design aesthetic, which is that kind of more modern industrial kind of feel, but it does not meet our typical code standards, which require a 2-foot tall masonry base and landscaping equal to twice the area of the signage surrounding the base. However, staff believes it does meet that creative sign criteria. It's an aesthetic improvement to the site. It contributes to that clean, unique visual appearance of the development, and it's an inventive representation of that development's design, and complements those proposed buildings, which also feature that kind of metal industrial aesthetic throughout. The Sona Lofts wall signage, per the typical sign codes, are only allowed a maximum of 125 square feet, but the development does qualify for the maximum for the master sign program, and because the building is over 25,000 square feet, and due to the size of the development, the 2 wall signs have to be at just anywhere under 400 square feet, and so they're proposed for 165.6 square feet, which is an appropriate level per the master sign program. And staff recommends approval.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move approval.
I'll second.
Second by Jessica, question by Dave.
Could you go back to the plan and just show us where those 2 large wall signs?
Yeah, sure. It might take a second with the slow keyboard here, but there we go. So the wall signs, one will be located facing east, kind of in the center of the property here, and then the other one will be located on this end here facing the street. Or actually, I believe this might be an older version. I believe it might be actually facing here.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Move on to item 6.
Our next item is the extension of time. Actually, items 5 and 6 are extensions of time for the same owner, Verinder Nagra, and his business partner, Jesus Bonilla. They own the property here at 2904 South 84th Street, the corner of 84th and Beloit. It's a former real estate office. It's been vacant for probably about 20 years. Prior to that, it was a fuel, actual service station. What they need is a little more time. They were approved for the conditional use and site landscaping approval last year, and about this time of fall of 2021. Council subsequently approved the conditional use in November of 21, and what they're running into are some hiccups with environmental conditions on the property, some soil conditions with being a former service station back in the probably 1950s or 60s, and also some asbestos. So that's taking a little more time, more than usual, to find the right contractor who's not busy and that or not exorbitant priced to get on site and do the work. So they're asking for 6 months' time. And as part of the conditional use, the extension of time is an allowance that can be offered by the Common Council without a public hearing. And but you need to show your construction schedule of when you expect to get going towards a building permit to demolish the building in this case, and then ultimately construct your end use. So what they're looking at is in late 2022. To get their asbestos report and work towards remediation of asbestos on site, and then the first quarter of 23 work towards building demolition and then ultimately start construction in early summer of 23. So that's their game plan, and they're requesting a 6-month extension of time to get to that building permit. To first demo the building, they'll need a demo permit for that, and then they'll need a building permit to construct. So I think it's in the city's best interest to offer an extension of time. Otherwise, it sits there in the condition it's been for the past 20 years. I mean, that's certainly an option, but I think it behooves the city to remove that otherwise vacant building on the corner that's really not serving any benefit, and work towards a developed site as approved last year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Steve, what evidence do you have that the applicant will go forth with this plan?
Well, we have an approved set of plans. They spent a lot of money on architects to put together, the site plan that was presented to the Planning Commission and the Common Council last year. So they have a lot of cost in the property already, just purchasing the property and then design cost, and they're committed to, not sitting and holding it or flipping it. I mean, they'd like to develop it and realize their vision.
And how will you monitor the progress?
Well, if it's approved by council, they have 6 months to obtain a permit to demo the building and ultimately work towards construction. And if that's not done in 6 months, I guess it comes back to the city for it automatically kind of expires if they sit on it and we're in the same position 6 months from now. They can come back and ask for another extension if there's a certain set of circumstances that why they haven't started, or the special use just terminates, and then they have to start over again, come back to the Planning Commission, reapply, come back to the Planning Commission, to the council with a plan.
I'd like to suggest that you be aggressive and follow this literally on a week-to-week basis to see if they're doing what they said they would do,
Right.
as opposed to find out 6 months from now they didn't do anything.
Yeah, that's the purpose of the special use or the conditional use resolution that we have. There's a section in there about termination of the special use. Basically, it's done a year. If you do nothing, if you don't obtain a building permit, the special use or the conditional use terminates. In this case, though, there is also a provision in that same resolution for an extension of time, and that's what they're exercising here. They're just looking for a little bit more time to get started. Yeah, David.
Thank you.
Dave?
Yeah, I will say if they are running into soil contamination issues or asbestos, it takes time to remediate that stuff and work around those issues. So to me, it doesn't look like anything that they're dragging their feet on or not trying to move forward with it. It probably is taking them additional time to deal with the issues that they're finding on the site. So I don't have any issues with it. I would move approval.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dan.
Dan.
Beacon Oil, by the way, in the 50s. Anyways, getting back, because happens to be my district. I happen to live close, and happens to be a lot of neighbors are asking me, what is going on? With the asbestos, obviously, that's in the building.
Yeah.
And there's a large dumpster out there past summer. I thought that was the asbestos removal dumpster. Was it or was it not?
Probably just
I don't
gutting,
know
yeah.
anything now.
Probably gutting what they could within the building without disturbing
Okay, and then
the parts that they need to remediate.
the extent of the soil contamination, when I go through there, there's all sorts of little tiny capped off borings, maybe 2 inches. What is the extent of that?
I'll have to ask, but that sounds like a monitoring well. If they're monitoring, the soil, they probably did a phase 1. They determined what the past uses were, and then a phase 2 to determine the extent of the contamination. I don't know the extent, no, but they've obviously found something on the site that's concerning where they got involved with DNR and then get a contractor to remediate. Yeah, so it sounds to me, the little bit I know about, and hearing it from the owner, it's a petroleum. With the service station back in the day, they probably had hydraulic lifts. It could be oil leaking from those hydraulic cylinders. It could be leaky fuel tanks from past gas stations. Those types of things, yeah.
Can I add something too?
Sure.
And you'll know when they're doing the asbestos removal because they'll have the HIPAA fans in there, and then they'll have all the contaminant and all the barrels out there on site. So you'll see a lot of that stuff in that containment area that they have to have in place per regulations. So it's a big job.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, there's a motion to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Was that item 5 and 6?
We should probably
Separate?
This number 6 is
Item
84th and Greenfield,
Oh,
and same property owner, and probably actually a similar problem
right.
with the site in terms of leaking hydraulics from the former O'Gorman SF analyzers auto repair use. The tanks in this case have been removed, so that portion's been taken care of when it ceased to be a Shell station, but then it became a service station, and the hydraulics from the lifts leak, and that causes a little soil contamination, so that has to be dealt with. I guess it's a common situation in West Dallas. Anytime you're doing redevelopment, you're always coming across it's either foundry sand or some kind of petroleum potentially in the soil, but it is something that needs to be dealt with before you start construction. So they're running into a similar time constraint. Also on the single-family property to the north here, which is also purchased by the owner, there's an underground utility, wire, electrical, and that has to be, they're working with We Energies, and that's taking a little bit longer time than normal to figure out a game plan for that, probably relocating electrical. So I'm not really sure what that's providing, or it's probably providing power to the home, or maybe somehow to the back of the building here, through the back, but that has to be dealt with as well. So it's leading to a delay, and so they're asking for a 6-month extension of time of the conditional use before it terminates. Thank you.
Questions?
I'd move approval.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. There's no other discussion. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Now we'll move on to item 7.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 7 is a batch of rezonings for the Greenfield Avenue corridor. Staff is proposing to rezone 22 properties along the corridor between 74th Street, including City Hall, to 105th Street. There will be several properties rezoned commercial, either C1, C2, or C3, and several different residential rezonings as well for RA3 and RC. We've received no objections to date. The goal of this is to eliminate split zoning along this corridor, and staff recommends approval. There will be a public hearing held November 15th.
Second. It's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. We'll move on to item 8.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 8 is for some other rezonings. These are scattered throughout the city. That would be to rezone 46 split zone properties. A lot of these are either river corridors, kind of by the kind of far west in the city, some tributaries to the Root River, some rail corridors, interstate corridors, We Energies corridors. These kind of land or parcels that extend very long distances, and then we're kind of split up amongst many different zoning districts before. We also have several properties on West Mitchell Street, and some other just kind of randomly split zone properties. So we have received one objection to date. This is for 1650 South 108th Street. It's currently split zone C3 and I1. C3 to the west of the property, kind of adjacent to Highway 100, and I1 further back. Staff is proposing to zone this solely as C3. This property is the home of Able Distributing. They use the site as a retail showroom and warehouse. That's considered a commercial light industrial flex use, which is allowed as a conditional use in the C3 district and in the I1 district. This property was actually previously up for rezoning when the city was updating zoning along the Highway 100 corridor in accordance with that strategic plan. At that time, it was removed from the rezoning list so that staff could create a more appropriate use category for that kind of commercial light industrial flex. This is kind of that landmark that kind of led to that being included in the zoning code update. The attorney for that property wanted to work with the city to create this new definition so that it wouldn't be a non-conforming use in that C3 district. This today, with this rezoning, it would not influence whether that that use would be non-conforming or whether it would be allowed as a conditional use, because it still would be allowed as a conditional use. The property owner is concerned about the potential for reuse of the site if this were to change to C3, that they wouldn't be able to use it for those kind of industrial uses. However, we see this, the staff sees this as a pretty important site as part of that Highway 100 study. We would still prefer to rezone this as C3 in accordance with that strategic plan. There are some other options that the Planning Commission and Council could consider. It could be removed from the rezoning list. It would be left as the only split zone property in the city, which staff sees would cause some issues. It would contradict our goal to eliminate split zoning. It would cause some GIS database management problems, increase confusion for how that site is zoned, and it would also be kind of an example of spot zoning where we'd have a different practice for this one lot than the rest of the city. Another option would be to change the zoning to I-1. That would require a future land use map change. It would not be in accordance with our current future land use map, and wouldn't align with the strategic plan for that Highway 100 corridor. So staff has not recommended that option as well.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move approval of option 1.
All right, yes, and that's what we recommend as well.
That is the as-is?
Yes, that's the as-is. Yep, we recommend as-is.
Or is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carries. Item 9. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Here, I'll do this guy. We just want to introduce to you a new concept that I guess we've been probably thinking about in a roundabout way for a while, but it sort of was brought to a head by a new, well, I mean, not a new property owner, but of the DECO, Walter Holtz. He's proposed a DECO, and that was before the Plan Commission earlier in the year, for an event space at 7140 Greenfield Avenue. And he's getting close to finishing his build on his event space and hopefully opening in the new year. But he wants to take a look at and work with the city and the Business Improvement District on a proposal to close a portion of 72nd Street from Greenfield Avenue here on the south to just before you get to the alley. This red line is the existing alley. It would remain open, but 72nd Street could potentially be closed for a pedestrian mall. And a pedestrian mall is a little bit different than vacating the street. When we vacate a street like we did with Kegel's on 59th Street, part of the street went to the Kegel's property and the other part went to the public table owner, which also happens to be Kegel's in this case, but as a result. But in this case, though, this portion of 72nd would remain public right-of-way, so it wouldn't be controlled or, I guess, owned by private property owners. Certainly, private property owners within the downtown area, the Business Improvement District, could use this as a public plaza. It could be programmed as a special event throughout the year for whether it's picnics or a la carte, car shows, you name it. It could be used in different ways other than what we've been used to forever, which is just a part of the grid, part of the street grid. So some examples of this, I mean, on the next slide are shown here. I mean, this is an example where we vacated the street and it became private property. But in Wauwatosa, there's a good example of, that's not a street, it used to be a parking lot, but they kind of created a public space out of it. It's like an outdoor park of sorts with things to do, picnic tables, seating, umbrellas, some interesting signage, which is actually bike racks along North Avenue. This is across the street from Bel Air Cantina in that area. So it's sort of a similar concept, but this would be on a portion of a side street on 72nd Street. Up above here is more or less an artist's rendering of what it could look like. This is the DECO building, and then across the street you have a mixed-use building. You've got some doctor's offices on the ground floor with apartments above. And they're showing some string lights sort of attached to the buildings across the top, but you see patio umbrellas underneath. So this could be set up for various events, whether it's for catered events as run by the DECO on certain nights of the year, or if the Business Improvement District or any other businesses in downtown wanted to use it for a certain event, it could be available. In this particular rendering, it shows a little bit more permanent closure of the street, with a sidewalk and curb, similar to what was done, at Kegel's. But to start, I think if this were approved by the council, what we'd probably start out with would be a more temporary measure with some Jersey barriers, just to make it safe, to block it off from street traffic from turning down this way off of Greenfield Avenue or from the alley. Just to, again, sort of create that separation between motorists and plaza pedestrians, and some landscaping and more permanent curb and sidewalk could be added later if it's a success. If it doesn't turn out to be a success, maybe say after the first year or so, it could just go back to being a street, or you could come up with a different iteration that could potentially work. So what we're proposing here is just to sort of try something and just to sort of introduce you to the concept of it, to get your feelings and feedback. There's no decision that's needed tonight. This is just sort of a no action item at this point. Our next steps are really just to gather feedback. We're going to have a neighborhood outreach meeting on November 10th with everyone along 72nd Street between basically Greenfield Avenue up north, I think Walker Street. We're going to be hanging some door hangers on people's front doors. And then also on the bid, east and west of 72nd Street, we just want to do some outreach there. The bid's been informed of this already, and they're interested, but they're also cautious, I would say. Some business owners are concerned about street traffic, the parking, as well as truck access. Some businesses here have semis or larger trucks that come down the alleys, and I believe the drivers may be using 72nd Street now. And what's a little bit concerning to them, with that, if they lose access here at 72nd, is that 71st, is a one-way street, so you can't go south on 71st. So if the truck comes in on 73rd here and then services all these businesses, they're going to have to leave, and they're going to have to turn north. They won't be able to go south. So that sort of brings up another discussion about why is 71st Street a one-way street. I don't exactly know the history of that. 74th is a similar.
I'm sorry, what's the history of
71st. Yeah. So, yeah, it could resort back to maybe MATC or an Alice Chalmers thing. For some reason, we'd have to look back into the history books, but there's really not a good reason that I can find of why 71st isn't a two-way street. So that could be a solution in a sense, that 71st becomes a two-way street. It sounds like another neighborhood meeting, but so we got some things to work on, but we just want to broach this topic with you this evening to see if you have any ideas, feedback. Is this crazy? Should we pursue it?
I think it's good. I think it's a good idea. Definitely perked my interest, Steve. And I guess for me, I'd be kind of interested in just hearing what the feedback would be after you have a neighborhood meeting. But no, it's you have to be creative, I think, right?
Yeah, we can definitely report that to you in the December Plan Commission meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
Rossi and then David.
Yeah, personally, whether or not it's this location, I love the idea of a plaza. See, where I come from, or my family, every village in Mexico has a plaza, and it's a great place for family and friends to kind of get together and enjoy the area and the flowers and all the festivities in the village. So I think it's a great idea. And also, I've gone to many little outskirts villages around Milwaukee and Illinois, and they have these plazas, and it's really nice. And they have the shopping centers around it. And then that area is congested as it is, so I think it would be great to block off that right turn to go into that street in that ideal location, because it would definitely help with the traffic flow in that area.
Okay, thank you.
David?
I forget. Is 72nd one way going north?
Two-way. 72nd is a two-way, yeah. 71st is the one-way street.
Yeah, that's something with our engineering department. We've had some internal discussions about too, and there's not the reasons for why it's a one-way are kind of there's several streets like that in the downtown, and it's kind of just how it's been. There's not a real reason for it, and I know a lot of modern best practices for street design is to have more two-way streets than one-way streets. One-way streets can be kind of restrictive and confusing, and also can encourage higher traffic speeds on like a neighborhood street like that, where you have kind of more of a runway to go with more of the street dedicated towards the one direction. So some definitely could be considered with this.
So, as somebody who lives right across the street from this, across Greenfield Avenue, I would not object to this. I like the idea a lot. I think I can see different uses for this area. I think that we would definitely have to do something with 71st Street, maybe make it two ways to make the whole thing work and make everybody happy. But it'd be a nice little destination center here for West Dallas, and I think it can make downtown a lot more lively, I guess.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Steve, as currently envisioned, who would control that property?
So it'd be city-owned property, and so as far as programming goes, that would have to be structured through some sort of a special event permit process, or certainly I think the DECO wants to use this more often than not. They're planning on a number of events throughout the year, but that's going to have to be. It's a shared space after all, and we have to sort of balance that with the interests of the business improvement district and other business owners in the downtown. So we want it to be something useful for everyone, but we also realize that the DECO would like to use that to showcase, their business, and in showcasing their business, I think it also showcases our city too. So I think it opens up a lot of possibilities for the future. So
as stated by Eric and some other colleagues, I think it's creative, and you ought to keep exploring, figure out what the best use is and how it can work out.
Thank you.
Definitely. Thanks for all your feedback, and we'll be.
And then Marty? No. Steve, I know this is discussion only, but was it discussed with the fire and police department?
Yes, it was. They were both supportive of the effort. Yep.
Great.
And Steve didn't mention this, but I believe Greenfield Avenue is due for a reconstruction in 5 years?
2027 or later.
Yeah. So this would be, I see a great test here, a minor investment maybe by the neighboring property owner in the city, and maybe when the whole street gets reconstructed, it becomes a model for stuff then permanent stuff could be done, curbs poured, sidewalk put across.
Yep.
But yeah, so
Yeah, exactly.
I support it as alderman of the district. Just struck me that maybe there'd be fewer weddings in late December and January. Maybe it could be an ice rink for 6 weeks. So.
Yeah, and I think for the initial talks we've heard from Walter Holtz is that the only time the DECO would probably be using it would be from I think it was April to October, so the winter season would be open for something like that.
You could see some snowman there, or ice sculpting, or something like that. Okay. Thanks.
That concludes item 9. We'll go to the tracking updates, number 10.
Thank you, Mayor. Some brief project tracking updates this month. Some September Plan Commission items were approved by the Common Council, including the CSM for the Palace Days Inn property, the Big B conditional use permit, and then the rezonings for the Beloit and Lincoln Avenue corridors. We also, just some updates, Taco John's, if you've driven past theirs, is going up. That building the shell is now complete. And there, the facade hasn't been built yet. The interior stuff hasn't been built, but that's probably the next steps. We also wanted to mention that the We Energies Training Center, that kind of northwest part of the city, the designers of that project came back to us, and they were able to find the color match for the rest of the facade. If you remember from that project, they were doing an addition, and it was going to be a complementary color. I believe sort of red compared to the tan of the main building. Maybe I have it the other way around. Anyway, they were able to find that kind of color match, and so they would like to go with that. Staff approved that change as well. And that ends the project tracking updates.
Questions?
Do we know what happened with that Stop and Go coffee that was right on 108th by that Target?
Oh, yeah.
And the Piggly Wiggly?
Yeah, it's still going forward. It's approved.
That was a Big B.
Big B coffee. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Should have had coffee.
So they did
next
get
to
it. Okay.
They did. They were approved. Yes. Yep.
They're working on some underground utility connection issues, which are costly, but that's their next step, to get that aligned and then begin construction.
So they did work something out with the bank?
Yes, they did. Yep.
So there's nothing else, then I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion.
Second.
Thought you all wanted to stay for a little. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Our next meeting.
They slid it down.
Yeah, the
It'll be
holiday edition. Yeah.
December 7th.